I never thought I would end up filing criminal charges against the president of my homeowner association. But then again, I never expected to find Brenda Hastings in my backyard, trying to disconnect my propane tank at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning. My name is Quincy Yates, and I had been living peacefully in the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision in Scottsdale, Arizona, for 3 years before Brenda moved into the neighborhood. The community was nice enough, with its adobe-style homes, manicured lawns, and mountain views. The HOA had always been manageable until Brenda got herself elected as president about 6 months ago. Since then, she had made it her personal mission to turn our quiet neighborhood into her own little kingdom where she made all the rules. I work from home as a software engineer, which means I am around the house most of the time. That particular Saturday morning, I had gotten up early to make some coffee and catch up on emails before the weekend truly began. I was standing in my kitchen, looking out the window at my backyard while waiting for the coffee maker to finish brewing, when I saw movement near my grill area. At first, I thought maybe it was a coyote or a javelina, which are not uncommon in Scottsdale. But when I looked closer, I realized it was a person wearing a bright pink tracksuit and white sneakers, bending over my large propane tank that I kept near my outdoor kitchen setup. My heart started racing as I recognized that pink tracksuit. Brenda wore it almost every weekend. I did not even bother grabbing my coffee. I rushed out the back door, not bothering with shoes, and called out, "What are you doing?" Brenda jumped and spun around, her hand still on the valve of my propane tank. Her face was flushed, either from being caught or from the exertion of trying to move a heavy propane tank. She was probably in her mid-40s, with that particular haircut that seemed to be mandatory for HOA presidents everywhere, short and heavily highlighted with blonde streaks. "Oh, Quincy," she said, trying to compose herself and straighten up. "I was just coming to talk to you about this tank. By sneaking into my backyard and putting your hands on my property," I asked, my voice rising with each word, "what are you really doing?" Brenda put her hands on her hips, her initial surprise transforming into that attitude of entitlement I had seen her use on other neighbors during HOA meetings. "I am the HOA president, Quincy. I have the authority to inspect properties for violations. And I need to discuss your propane tank with you. At 7 in the morning, without notice, that is called trespassing, Brenda." She waved her hand dismissively. "Do not be so dramatic. Listen, I am having a hot tub installed next week and I need a propane tank for the heater. Mine will not arrive for another 2 weeks because of supply chain issues. I figured since we are all part of the same community, you would not mind letting me borrow yours temporarily." I stared at her, genuinely stunned. "You came into my yard to take my propane tank without asking me first." "I am asking you now," she said, as if this logic made perfect sense. "You hardly use your grill anyway. I have been watching, and I have only seen you grill maybe 3 times this year." The fact that she had been monitoring my grilling habits was creepy enough, but the audacity of her request, or rather her demand, left me momentarily speechless. "Brenda, first of all, whether I use my grill once a year or every single day is none of your business. Second, that is a $500 propane tank that is full right now. And third, you cannot just come onto my property and take things." "I was not taking it," she insisted. "I was checking to see if it was full so I would know if it would work for my hot tub. And I am not asking for it permanently, just a loan between neighbors. We are not friends, Brenda, we are barely neighbors, and the answer is absolutely not." Her expression hardened. "I see. Well, that is very selfish of you, Quincy. This is exactly the kind of attitude that creates problems in a community. You know, now that I am out here, I am noticing several violations. Your grass is at least half an inch over the maximum allowed height. And is that a wind chime I hear? Because decorative noisemakers require HOA approval, which I do not recall you requesting. Are you seriously trying to threaten me with HOA violations because I would not let you take my propane tank? I am not threatening anything, Brenda said, her voice taking on a saccharine sweetness that was somehow more threatening than outright hostility. I am simply doing my job as HOA president and noting violations when I see them. It would be such a shame if you started accumulating fines. They can add up so quickly, $50 per violation per day. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. Brenda, I want you off my property right now, and if I ever catch you back here without my explicit permission, I will call the police. She laughed, actually laughed. The police? Over a community matter. They will just tell you to work it out with the HOA. Do you know how many times officers have told me they do not get involved in HOA disputes? But fine, be that way. I was trying to be neighborly, but clearly you are not interested in being part of this community. She turned and walked toward the side gate, adding over her shoulder, expect a formal notice of violations in your mailbox by Monday, and I will be reviewing your property very carefully from now on. After she left, I stood there in my backyard, my bare feet starting to burn on the sun-warmed pavers, trying to process what had just happened. I went back inside, finally poured myself that coffee, and sat down to think about my next move. I knew Brenda was serious about the violations. She had already done similar things to other neighbors who had crossed her. The Hendersons 3 houses down had refused to repaint their trim the exact shade of beige Brenda deemed appropriate. And suddenly, they were being cited for everything from their trash, cans being visible from the street, to their driveway having oil stains. They eventually sold their house and moved rather than continue fighting. But I was not the Hendersons. I had not done anything wrong, and I was not going to be bullied into handing over my property or living in fear of petty violations. I spent the rest of Saturday researching Arizona HOA laws, trespassing laws, and my rights as a homeowner. What I found was interesting. While HOAs do have broad authority in Arizona, they do not have the right to enter private property without notice, except in genuine emergencies. Brenda's claim about inspecting for violations did not hold water legally. She was required to provide advance written notice and schedule a time with the homeowner. Additionally, I learned that I could absolutely file trespassing charges if someone entered my property without permission, HOA president or not. Sunday passed quietly, but I remained vigilant. I installed a security camera system I had bought months ago but never gotten around to setting up. I positioned cameras to cover my backyard, front yard, and both side gates. If Brenda came back, I would have evidence. Monday morning, true to her word, I found a thick envelope from the HOA in my mailbox. Inside were notices for 5 different violations, including grass height, an unauthorized wind chime, improper storage of a propane tank, a garden hose visible from the street, and faded house numbers that needed repainting. Each violation came with a $50 per day fine starting immediately. I read through each notice carefully. Most were completely bogus. My grass was exactly at the allowed height because I had measured it after she left on Saturday. The wind chime had been approved when I moved in, and I had the paperwork to prove it. The propane tank was stored in compliance with both HOA rules and Arizona fire codes. The garden hose was in my backyard, not visible from the street at all, and my house numbers had been repainted less than a year ago. This was pure retaliation, and it was stupid of her to make it so obvious. I scanned all the notices and every piece of documentation I had regarding my property compliance. Then, I drafted a formal response to the HOA, not just to Brenda, but to the entire board. I explained each violation notice and provided evidence that they were baseless. I also included a formal complaint about Brenda's unauthorized entry onto my property. I sent the response via certified mail to every board member whose address I could find through the HOA directory. Then, I waited. Wednesday afternoon, I got a phone call from David Rodriguez, the HOA vice president. He was a reasonable guy in his 60s who had lived in Meadowbrook Hills since it was first built. "Quincy, I got your letter," he said, sounding tired. "And I am looking at these violation notices Brenda sent you. I have to be honest, this does not look good." "No, it does not," I agreed. "She came onto my property without permission, tried to take my propane tank, and when I refused, she retaliated with fake violations." David sighed heavily. "Look, just between us, Brenda has been difficult to work with. She has her own way of doing things, and she does not always follow proper procedures. But proving retaliation is hard, and going after an HOA president creates a lot of drama in the community." "I am not creating drama, David. I am protecting my property and my rights. She trespassed, and if she does it again, I am calling the police." "I understand you are upset, but can we try to resolve this reasonably? What if I talk to Brenda, get her to withdraw the violations, and we all move forward?" "That does not address the trespassing," I said, "or the fact that she tried to take my property, or that she is clearly abusing her position. What do you want me to do, Quincy?" "I want the board to formally censure her for entering my property without authorization and for filing false violation reports. And I want it in writing that she is not to come onto my property again." David was quiet for a moment. "I will bring it up at the next board meeting." "That is the best I can offer right now. It was not enough, but it was something." "When is the meeting?" "Next Tuesday at 7 at the community center. You are welcome to attend and present your concerns during the homeowner forum." I marked my calendar. In the meantime, I continued monitoring my security cameras. Thursday evening around 9 o'clock, I was watching television when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the backyard camera. I pulled up the live feed and felt my blood pressure spike. Brenda was back in my yard, this time with a man I did not recognize. They were both standing near my propane tank, and Brenda was pointing at it while talking to him. The man was nodding and examining the tank. I watched for about 30 seconds, recording everything, before I grabbed my phone and headed outside. As I came through the back door, I called out, "Brenda, I warned you to stay off my property." Both she and the man jumped. The man looked embarrassed, but Brenda just looked annoyed. "Quincy, this is Miguel Santos, a licensed propane installer. I hired him to look at various propane setups in the neighborhood for my hot tub installation. This is perfectly legitimate HOA business." Miguel held up his hands. "Look, man, I did not know this was a private property issue." "She told me she had permission to be here." "She does not," I said firmly. "Brenda, you need to leave right now and take your contractor with you." "I have every right to be here," Brenda insisted. "As HOA president, I can conduct inspections." "Not without notice and permission, you cannot." "This is the second time you have trespassed on my property, and I have video evidence of both incidents. Leave now, or I am calling the police." Miguel was already backing toward the gate. "Lady, I am not getting involved in this. Call me when you have your own tank." He left quickly, clearly wanting no part of whatever was happening. Brenda stood her ground for a moment longer, her face red with anger or embarrassment or both. "You are making a huge mistake, Quincy. You do not want me as an enemy, and you do not want a trespassing charge on your record." Leave. She finally left, slamming the gate behind her hard enough that I heard it crack. I immediately saved the video footage from both incidents and backed it up to cloud storage. Then I called the Scottsdale police non-emergency number. The officer who answered listened to my situation and said, "So she has been on your property twice without permission, and you have video evidence?" "Yes, both times. And she tried to take my propane tank the first time." "Did she actually remove it from your property?" "No, I caught her before she could." "Okay. What you can do is file a formal trespassing report. If she comes back after you have filed that report, it becomes criminal trespassing, which we take more seriously. Do you want to file a report?" "Yes, I do." The officer sent someone to my house within an hour. Officer Janet Park was professional and thorough. She watched both videos, took my statement, and photographed my property, including the propane tank and the damaged gate. "This is pretty clear-cut," she said. "She had no legitimate reason to be on your property, especially after you told her to stay away. I am going to file this report, and we will send her a formal notice that she has been reported for trespassing, and that any future incidents will result in immediate arrest. You should also consider getting a no trespass order." "What is that exactly?" "It is a formal legal document that puts someone on notice that they are not welcome on your property under any circumstances. If they violate it, it is automatically criminal trespassing. Given that she is your HOA president and might claim she has reasons to be here, it could be helpful." I got the paperwork for the no trespass order before Officer Park left. She also gave me a case number for the report and told me I could follow up if I needed anything else. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my security cameras, half expecting to see Brenda skulking around my yard again. But she did not come back that night. Friday, I went to the Scottsdale Municipal Court and filed for a no trespass order against Brenda. The clerk told me it would be processed and served to her within a few days. I also went to Home Depot and bought a heavy-duty lock and chain for my propane tank. It was probably overkill, but after everything that had happened, I was not taking any chances. When I got home and locked up the propane tank, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. Even if Brenda did come back, she would not be able to take it without bolt cutters, which would escalate things from trespassing to theft and destruction of property. The weekend passed without incident, but I noticed Brenda's car driving by my house several times. Each time, she slowed down as she passed, clearly trying to see into my yard. I made sure to wave at her from my doorway just to let her know I saw her. Monday, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a woman identified herself as Patricia Chen, an attorney. "Mr. Yates, I have been retained by the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowner Association to discuss the recent conflicts between yourself and the HOA board." "Do you have time to speak?" My stomach dropped. "The HOA hired a lawyer." "Yes. There are concerns about your recent actions and threats toward the HOA president. We would like to resolve this amicably before it escalates further." "My threats?" "She is the one who trespassed on my property twice and tried to steal my propane tank. I filed a police report, and I have video evidence." Patricia's voice remained professional but cool. "Mr. Yates, HOA presidents have broad authority to inspect properties for violations and ensure community standards are maintained. What you perceive as trespassing may well be within her legal rights as outlined in your CC and Articles, which you agreed to when you purchased your home." I read the CC and Articles, and there is nothing that gives her the right to enter my property without notice. I would encourage you to review Section 7, Subsection C, which grants the HOA board the right to enter properties for inspections related to maintenance and violation verification. After I hung up, I immediately pulled out my copy of the CC and Articus and found the section she mentioned. It did grant inspection rights, but it also required reasonable notice and specified that inspections should be conducted during normal business hours with the homeowner present or notified. Brenda had done neither. I called Patricia Chen back. I reviewed the section you mentioned. It requires notice and does not authorize unannounced entries at 7 in the morning or 9 at night. Interpretations of those documents can vary, Mr. Yates. The HOA board believes their actions were appropriate. However, in the interest of community harmony, they are willing to withdraw the violation notices if you withdraw your police report and no trespass order. Absolutely not. She committed a crime, and I am not dropping the charges or the order just because she hired a lawyer to intimidate me. I see. Then I should inform you that the HOA is prepared to move forward with foreclosure proceedings if your violation fines remain unpaid. As of today, you owe approximately $1,400 for violations that are completely fabricated. The HOA board has documented the violations. Whether you agree with their assessment or not, you are obligated to pay the fines or follow the dispute resolution process outlined in the CC and Articus, which I have already initiated by filing my formal response with the board. Nevertheless, the fines accumulate until the violations are resolved. I encourage you to consider our offer carefully. Fighting the HOA is expensive and stressful, and they have significantly more resources than you do. After that call, I knew I needed my own lawyer. I spent Monday afternoon researching attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes in Arizona. Most of the reviews I found were from people who had lost their battles with HOAs, which was not encouraging. But I finally found a lawyer named Robert Kim, who had several positive reviews specifically mentioning victories against overreaching HOA boards. I called his office and managed to get an appointment for Tuesday morning, before the HOA board meeting that evening. Robert's office was in downtown Scottsdale, in a modern building with glass walls and contemporary art. He was younger than I expected, probably in his late 30s, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. "Quincy, come in," he said, shaking my hand. "Tell me what is going on." I laid out everything that had happened, from Brenda's first trespassing incident to the violation notices to the HOA's lawyer calling me. I showed him all my documentation, the videos, the police report, and the correspondence. Robert watched the videos twice, taking notes. When I finished explaining everything, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "This is actually a pretty good case. Your HOA president clearly overstepped, and she is now engaging in obvious retaliation. The fact that they hired a lawyer, this quickly tells me they know they are in the wrong and are trying to scare you into backing down. Can they really foreclose on my house over these fake violations? They can try, but they would have to go through the proper legal process first, which takes months and requires proof that the violations are legitimate. Given your documentation showing the violations are false, and given the clear retaliation after you refused to let her take your property, I do not think they would succeed. But that does not mean they would not try to make your life miserable in the meantime. So what do I do? First, do not pay the fines. Paying them implies you acknowledge the violations as legitimate. Second, I am going to draft a letter to the HOA board and their attorney laying out your position, including the evidence of trespassing and retaliation. Third, we attend tonight's board meeting and you present your case publicly. HOA boards hate public scrutiny, especially when they are in the wrong. What is this going to cost me? Robert quoted me a retainer fee that made me wince, but I agreed. At this point, I was committed to fighting this properly. He spent the next few hours drafting a detailed letter to the HOA, complete with screenshots from my security videos and citations of the specific Arizona statutes Brenda had violated. That evening, Robert and I arrived at the community center together at 6:45. The meeting was scheduled for 7, but several homeowners were already there, sitting in the folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table where the board members would sit. I recognized most of my neighbors, though I had not spoken to many of them beyond casual waves. Brenda arrived at 6:55, walking in with 3 other board members. When she saw me sitting in the front row with Robert, her expression darkened. She said something to David Rodriguez, the vice president, and he glanced over at us with an unreadable expression. The meeting started with standard HOA business, including minutes from the last meeting, financial reports, and updates on various community projects. It was painfully boring, and I could tell most people were not really paying attention. But when they got to new business, David cleared his throat. We have a situation that needs to be addressed regarding a dispute between a homeowner and the HOA board. Quincy Yates has filed complaints about violation notices, and there are some other concerns. Quincy, you are on the agenda to speak during the homeowner forum, but maybe we should address this now. Before I could respond, Brenda cut in. I do not think this is appropriate for a public meeting. This is a private matter between the HOA and Mr. Yates. Actually, Robert said, standing up, HOA board meetings are public forums for homeowners, and matters of HOA enforcement are absolutely appropriate topics. My client has every right to address this publicly. And who are you? Brenda asked sharply. Robert Kim, attorney representing Mr. Yates. And I have to say, I am glad we are having this conversation publicly, because the actions taken by this board, specifically by you, Mrs. Hastings, are not only inappropriate but potentially illegal. The room, which had been filled with the quiet murmur of side conversations, went completely silent. Every homeowner was suddenly paying attention. I saw several people pull out their phones, probably to record what was happening. Brenda's face flushed. That is a serious accusation. I suggest you be very careful about what you say. I am always careful, Mrs. Hastings, which is why I have video evidence of you trespassing on my client's property on 2 separate occasions, once while attempting to remove his personal property without permission. Would the board like to see the videos? David looked at Brenda, who had gone pale. Brenda, what is he talking about? I was conducting HOA inspections, which is my right and responsibility as president. Mr. Yates is mischaracterizing the situation. Robert pulled out his laptop and connected it to the projector that was set up for the meeting, which the HOA typically used for displaying financial reports. Let's let everyone see and judge for themselves. He played both videos. The room watched in silence as the first video showed Brenda in my backyard at 7 in the morning, her hand on my propane tank, jumping when I confronted her. The audio was clear enough to hear her say she needed my tank for her hot tub. The second video was even more damning, showing her returning at night with a contractor, again examining my propane tank. When the videos ended, the silence was broken by murmuring throughout the room. Several homeowners were shaking their heads, and I heard someone behind me mutter, "That is crazy." As you can see, Robert continued, Mrs. Hastings entered my client's property without notice or permission, on 2 occasions with the apparent intent to remove his personal property for her own use. When Mr. Yates refused to let her take his propane tank, she retaliated by issuing multiple false violation notices. We have documentation proving each violation notice is baseless, which I am happy to provide to the board. Another board member, a woman named Carol Peters, who I had met once or twice, spoke up. "Brenda, did you issue violation notices after this incident with the propane tank?" "I issued legitimate violation notices after conducting a thorough inspection," Brenda said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Inspection at 7 in the morning without notice?" Carol asked. "That is not proper procedure, and you know it. We have policies for inspections." David was reading through a packet of papers, presumably the copies of the violation notices and my responses that I had sent to all board members. "These violations do seem questionable. Brenda, did you verify these with measurements and photographs?" "I do not need to justify my enforcement decisions to anyone," Brenda snapped. "I am the president of this board, and I have the authority to identify and cite violations as I see them." "Actually, you do not," Robert interjected. "The HOA board as a whole has that authority, not individual members acting alone, and all HOA actions must follow the established procedures and be conducted in good faith, not as retaliation for personal grievances." David set down the papers and looked at Brenda. "I think we need to have an executive session to discuss this." "I agree," Carol said. Another board member nodded. Brenda stood abruptly. "Fine. But I want everyone to know that Quincy Yates is a difficult homeowner who refuses to be a team player in this community. He filed a police report against me for doing my job, and he is trying to undermine the authority of this board." "He filed a police report because you committed a crime," Robert said calmly. "And he is not undermining anything. He is exercising his rights as a homeowner and a citizen." The board called for a 15-minute recess to discuss the matter privately. During the break, several neighbors came up to me to express their support. One woman, Margaret Torres, who lived 2 streets over, squeezed my shoulder and said, "Thank you for standing up to her. She has been out of control and someone needed to call her out." Another neighbor, Tom Brewster, added, "She tried to fine me $300 last month because she said my palm tree was diseased and needed to be removed. I got an arborist to certify it was perfectly healthy, but she would not back down until I threatened to lawyer up." "I am glad you have an attorney." After 20 minutes, the board came back. David looked uncomfortable as he took his seat. "The board has discussed the situation, and we have decided to take the following actions. First, all violation notices issued to Quincy Yates are hereby withdrawn pending proper reinspection following standard procedures. Second, we are formally reminding all board members that property inspections require advance notice and must follow the procedures outlined in our governing documents. Third, we are initiating a review of all violation notices issued in the past 6 months to ensure they were properly documented and justified. It was not everything I wanted, but it was something." Brenda sat with her arms crossed, glaring at the table in front of her. "Furthermore," David continued, "we want to address the allegations of trespassing. While we believe Mrs. Hastings' intentions were to fulfill her HOA responsibilities, we acknowledge that proper procedures were not followed. Mrs. Hastings, you are directed to have no further direct contact with Mr. Yates regarding HOA matters. All communication will go through the board as a whole or through our property manager." Brenda finally spoke, her voice tight with anger. "This is ridiculous. You are letting him manipulate you with his lawyer and his accusations. I have done nothing wrong." Carol shook her head. "Brenda, we watched the videos. You went onto his property to take his propane tank for your personal use. That is not HOA business." I was going to borrow it temporarily for community relationship building, Brenda protested. By taking it without asking, Carol said. Come on, Brenda, this is not defensible. The meeting ended shortly after that, with Brenda storming out without speaking to anyone. Several homeowners stayed after to talk to me and Robert, sharing their own stories of Brenda's overreach. It became clear that this had been building for a while, and my situation was just the most egregious example. Over the next few days, things seemed to settle down. I did not hear from Brenda or the HOA's attorney. The no trespass order was officially served to Brenda on Thursday, and Officer Park called to confirm that Brenda had been informed that any future entry onto my property would result in immediate arrest. How did she react? I asked. She was not happy, Officer Park said with a slight laugh. She tried to argue that as HOA president she had authority to be on your property. I explained that HOA authority does not supersede criminal law. She said she would be consulting with her attorney. Great, more legal threats. Just document everything and call us immediately if she violates the order. We take these seriously. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did, but I should have known better. 2 weeks later, I was working at my home office when my doorbell rang around 2 in the afternoon. I was not expecting anyone, and delivery people usually just left packages on the porch. I checked my security camera feed on my phone and saw a Scottsdale police cruiser in my driveway. My heart sank as I went to answer the door. Had something happened? Had Brenda filed a false police report against me? 2 officers stood on my porch, and they did not look friendly. Quincy Yates, one of them asked. Yes, that is me. What is this about? We received a report that you have been harassing and threatening a member of your homeowner association board. We need to ask you some questions. I could not believe it. Harassing. I have not had any contact with Brenda Hastings except for filing the no trespass order. So you admit you filed legal action against her, the officer said. Yes, because she trespassed on my property twice. Officer Park filed the report. You should have it in your system. The officers exchanged a glance. Can we come in? I let them in, my mind racing. The officers, whose names were Martinez and Johnson according to their name tags, sat in my living room while I pulled up the case number from my no trespass order and showed them Officer Park's report. Officer Martinez read through the information on his mobile computer. Okay, we have the report here. So what is Mrs. Hastings claiming now? I do not know. What did she tell you? She filed a report this morning claiming that you have been driving past her house multiple times a day, sitting outside in your car watching her house, and that you sent her a threatening letter. She says she feels unsafe. I actually laughed, which probably was not the right reaction, but the absurdity was too much. That is completely false. I work from home. I have not driven past her house even once, and I certainly have not sent her any letters. You know where she lives, vaguely. I know it is somewhere in the neighborhood, but I could not tell you the exact address. I have never been there. Officer Johnson spoke up. She provided us with photographs of a car that looks like yours parked on her street. What kind of car do I supposedly drive? A dark blue Honda Accord. I drive a gray Toyota Camry. You can see it in the driveway right now. The officers looked at each other again. Officer Martinez sighed. Do you mind if we take a photo of your car and your license plate? Not at all. We went outside and they photographed my car from several angles. It was clearly not a Honda Accord, and it was clearly gray, not blue. What about this threatening letter? Officer Johnson asked. The only letter I sent was through my attorney, and it was addressed to the HOA board, not to her personally. It was a formal legal letter outlining my position in our dispute. My attorney has a copy if you need to see it. Officer Martinez closed his notebook. Mr. Yates, I am going to be straight with you. This looks like a retaliatory false report. We are going to document that your car does not match the description, and that you have alibis for the times she claimed you were watching her house, since you said you work from home and should have computer records of being online. I absolutely do. I work in software, so my computer logs are detailed. Good. Keep those records. If she continues to file false reports, she could be charged with filing a false police report, which is a crime. In the meantime, avoid any contact with her. Do not drive past her house. Do not try to talk to her, nothing. After the officers left, I immediately called Robert Kim and told him what had happened. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. She is escalating, he finally said. Filing a false police report is a serious move. It shows she is getting desperate. What do I do? Exactly what the police said. Document everything, avoid her completely, and let me handle any legal communication. I am also going to send a letter to the police department documenting this incident and putting on record that any future reports from her should be viewed skeptically given this false report. Can we do anything about her filing a false report? The police have to determine if they want to pursue charges, but it is definitely something we can use if this ever goes to court. She is creating a pattern of behavior that shows harassment and abuse of process. The next day, Friday, I got a call from David Rodriguez again. Quincy, I heard about what happened with the police yesterday. Brenda told us her side, but I wanted to hear from you. I explained exactly what happened, including that my car did not match the description Brenda gave to police. David groaned. This is getting out of hand. Look, some of us on the board are concerned about Brenda's behavior. This has gone way beyond normal HOA business. We are calling a special board meeting next week to discuss her conduct, and we may vote on removing her as president. Can you do that? Yes, with a majority board vote. It is not common, but given everything that has happened, I think we have grounds. The problem is that Brenda has been threatening to sue the HOA if we take action against her. She is claiming this is all a conspiracy because she has been enforcing rules that previous boards ignored. That is absurd. This started because she tried to steal my propane tank for her personal use. I know, and most of the board knows that too, but we have to follow proper procedures for removing a board member, which means documentation, meetings, and votes. It is going to take some time. That weekend, I finally felt like I could relax a little. The board seemed to be taking things seriously. The police knew about Brenda's false report, and I had my property secured with cameras and locks. I spent Saturday catching up on work and Sunday doing yard maintenance, making sure my grass was exactly at the allowed height, just in case Brenda tried anything else. Sunday evening around 8, just as the sun was setting, my security system went off. Motion detected in the backyard. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone and felt my blood run cold. Brenda was in my backyard again, and this time she had bolt cutters. She was actively cutting the chain on my propane tank lock. I immediately called 911. This is Quincy Yates at 4217 East Desert Bloom Avenue. I have an active trespassing in progress in my backyard. The trespasser has a no trespass order and is currently trying to steal my property with bolt cutters. I have video evidence. The dispatcher confirmed my address and said units were on the way. Do not confront the trespasser. Stay inside and keep recording. I watched through my phone as Brenda struggled with the bolt cutters. My lock was heavy duty and she was having trouble cutting through it. She kept looking around nervously, probably worried about being caught. After about 2 minutes, I heard sirens approaching. Brenda heard them too. She dropped the bolt cutters and ran toward my back gate. But as she reached it, Officer Martinez and another officer came through the gate, flashlights and guns drawn. "Police! Put your hands up!" Brenda screamed and threw her hands in the air. "I live here. This is my property." "No, it is not," I heard Officer Martinez say. "This is Quincy Yates' property, and you have a no trespass order. You are under arrest for criminal trespassing." I watched through my window as they handcuffed Brenda and walked her around the side of my house to the front. A few minutes later, Officer Martinez knocked on my front door. "Mr. Yates, she is in custody. We need to take your statement and collect the bolt cutters as evidence. Can we also get a copy of the security video?" "Absolutely." I gave them a detailed statement of everything that happened, and I downloaded the video footage to a USB drive for them. Officer Martinez examined the bolt cutters and the damaged chain. "This is attempted theft in addition to criminal trespassing," he said. "Since she violated the no trespass order and attempted to steal property valued over $100, these are both felonies under Arizona law. She is going to be booked tonight, and there will be a court date set. What happens now? She will be arraigned, probably on Monday or Tuesday. The county attorney will decide whether to prosecute, but given the video evidence and the no trespass order violation, I would say it is pretty likely. You will be notified if you need to testify." After the police left with Brenda in the back of their cruiser, I sat down on my couch and just stared at the wall for a while. This whole situation had spiraled from annoying to absurd to criminal. I never imagined when I moved into this neighborhood that I would end up having my HOA president arrested for trying to steal my propane tank. The story spread through the neighborhood almost immediately. By Monday morning, I had texts and emails from at least a dozen neighbors. Apparently, several people had seen the police cars and had started asking questions. When they found out what happened, the gossip mill went into overdrive. Margaret Torres came by Monday afternoon with a casserole and sympathy. "I heard what happened last night. This is insane, Quincy. I mean, I knew Brenda was power-hungry but trying to steal your propane tank. That is just criminal." "Literally," I said. She laughed. "Well, the neighborhood is definitely on your side. There is a petition going around to recall the entire HOA board and restructure the whole thing. A lot of people are fed up with how things have been handled." Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from Robert Kim. "Quincy, I have updates. Brenda was arraigned this morning and charged with felony criminal trespassing and attempted theft. She pleaded not guilty and posted bail. Her attorney tried to argue that she was acting in her capacity as HOA president and had authority to be on your property, but the judge shut that down pretty quickly." "Good. There is more." The HOA board held an emergency meeting last night and voted to remove Brenda as president and as a board member entirely. David Rodriguez is now the interim president, and they are planning to hold special elections for a new board. They are also talking about filing a civil suit against Brenda for bringing liability to the HOA through her actions. Wait, can they sue her? Yes. If her actions as president created legal liability for the HOA, which they did by leading to your trespassing complaints and now criminal charges, the HOA can seek to recover damages from her personally. It is called indemnification. Wow. And one more thing. I got a call from Brenda's attorney this morning. They want to settle. They are offering to drop all HOA violations permanently, pay your legal fees, pay for the damages to your gate and your lock, and agree to never contact you again. What do they want in return? They want you to write a letter to the county attorney asking for leniency in the criminal case. Not asking them to drop the charges, just saying that you do not want to see her go to prison and would prefer probation or community service. I thought about it for a moment. As angry as I was at Brenda, I did not particularly want to see her go to prison. I just wanted her to leave me alone and face consequences for what she did. "I will write the letter," I said. "But only if the settlement includes a permanent restraining order, not just a verbal agreement to not contact me. I will make sure that is in there." We spent the next week finalizing the settlement agreement. The HOA not only agreed to drop all violations, but also formally apologized in writing for Brenda's conduct. They paid Robert's fees, which were substantial at this point, and they paid to replace my lock, my chain, and repair my gate. Brenda herself signed a permanent restraining order, agreeing to stay at least 500 feet away from me and my property at all times. In exchange, I wrote a letter to the county attorney explaining that while I wanted Brenda to face appropriate consequences for her criminal actions, I did not believe prison time was necessary, and that I would be satisfied with probation, fines, and community service. The criminal case took several more months to resolve. Brenda eventually pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of misdemeanor criminal trespassing and misdemeanor attempted theft. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 100 hours of community service, a $5,000 fine, and mandatory anger management classes. She also had to publicly resign from the HOA board, which she had already done, but it was made part of the court order. The neighborhood drama continued for a while. Brenda listed her house for sale about a month after her sentencing, and it sold quickly. I heard through the gossip chain that she moved somewhere in Phoenix, far away from Scottsdale and Meadowbrook Hills. Good riddance. The HOA held special elections, and a new board was voted in. The new president was Carol Peters, the woman who had called out Brenda at that board meeting. She and the new board implemented a bunch of reforms, including stricter rules about how violations could be issued, mandatory training for board members, and a more transparent process for homeowners to dispute HOA actions. Carol actually called me a few weeks after she was elected. "Quincy, I want to personally apologize for everything you went through. What Brenda did was unacceptable, and the old board should have stopped her much sooner. We are committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again." "I appreciate that, Carol. I just want to live peacefully in my house without worrying about the HOA president trying to steal my stuff." She laughed. "That is a pretty low bar, but yes, we can definitely guarantee that." As things settled down, I found myself becoming more involved in the community, ironically. Several neighbors who had reached out during the whole situation became actual friends. Tom Brewster and I started having beers together on Friday evenings. Margaret Torres invited me to join the neighborhood book club, which I politely declined, but I did start attending the monthly community barbecues. The new HOA board actually functioned properly, focusing on maintaining common areas and organizing community events rather than harassing homeowners over tiny violations. The neighborhood felt friendlier, and I heard from multiple people that they felt like they could breathe easier without Brenda constantly watching for rule violations. My propane tank, which had started this whole mess, remained chained and locked for about 6 months after everything concluded. Eventually, I realized I was being paranoid and removed the chain. The tank sat there peacefully, and I used it regularly for grilling. Nobody tried to take it. About a year after the whole incident, I was grilling steaks in my backyard when David Rodriguez walked over from next door. He and his wife had become good friends of mine over the months. "Hey Quincy, those smell great," he said, leaning on the fence between our yards. "Thanks, want one? I made extra." "Sure, I will grab some beers and come over." As we sat on my patio eating steaks and drinking beer, David shook his head and smiled. You know, when you first moved in, I never would have guessed you would end up being the guy who took down the HOA president. I did not take her down. She took herself down by breaking the law. True, but you stood up to her when a lot of people were too scared. That took guts, especially when she started coming after you with violations and lawyers. I just wanted to keep my propane tank, I said with a laugh. And you did. You know what the funny thing is? Brenda's hot tub was delivered the same week she got arrested. She never even got to use it before she had to move. Really? Yep. The new owners got it as part of the house sale. I heard them say it was one of the reasons they bought the place. We both laughed at the irony. Brenda had caused all this chaos and committed crimes over a propane tank she needed for a hot tub she never even got to enjoy. A few months later, I got a letter from the county attorney's office informing me that Brenda had successfully completed her probation and community service. The case was officially closed. I filed the letter away with all the other documents from the incident, which had grown to quite a thick folder. I hoped I would never need to reference that folder again, but I kept it just in case. One thing I had learned from this whole experience was the importance of documentation. If I had not had those security videos, if I had not kept copies of every letter and email, if I had not taken photographs and written down dates and times, things could have gone very differently. Sometimes at neighborhood gatherings, new residents who had moved in after the incident would hear bits of the story and ask me about it. I always downplayed it, not wanting to rehash everything in detail. But the story had become a bit of neighborhood legend, the tale of the HOA president who tried to steal a propane tank and ended up with a criminal record. The whole experience changed how I viewed homeowner associations. I used to think they were just annoying bureaucracies that made petty rules about lawn height and house colors, and many of them are just that. But I learned that HOAs have real power over homeowners, and when that power falls into the wrong hands, it can be genuinely harmful. I also learned that homeowners have rights, and those rights can be enforced, but it takes persistence and often money for lawyers. I got more involved in the HOA after everything settled down, attending meetings regularly, and even joining a committee focused on updating the governing documents to include more protections for homeowners. I never wanted to be on the board myself, but I wanted to make sure that if another Brenda ever got elected, there were safeguards in place to limit the damage they could do. The new CC and Articles we drafted and got approved by the homeowners included specific procedures for property inspections, requiring written notice at least 48 hours in advance and the presence of at least 2 board members for any inspection. We also added language explicitly stating that HOA authority did not supersede criminal law and that board members who violated homeowner rights could be held personally liable. Looking back now, almost 2 years after that first morning when I caught Brenda trying to take my propane tank, the whole thing feels almost surreal. It started with something so absurd and escalated so quickly. But it taught me valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, documenting everything, and not backing down when you are in the right just because the other side has more resources or authority. My neighborhood is genuinely pleasant now. The HOA functions the way it should, maintaining common areas and organizing community events without harassing residents. My propane tank sits peacefully in my backyard, fueling regular barbecues for friends and neighbors. And I never have to worry about someone sneaking into my yard to try to take it. Sometimes I wonder what Brenda thinks about the whole situation now that she has had time to reflect. Does she regret her actions? Does she understand why what she did was wrong? Or does she still see herself as the victim of a conspiracy by an uncooperative homeowner and a board that did not support her? I will probably never know. And honestly, I do not need to know. She is out of my life, and that is what matters. The restraining order is permanent, so even if she wanted to contact me, she legally cannot. And I am perfectly fine with that. The propane tank that started everything is still going strong. I replaced the regulator once and refilled it probably 24 times, but it is the same tank. Sometimes when I am grilling, I pat it affectionately and think about how this simple piece of equipment became the center of a neighborhood drama that ended with criminal charges and an HOA restructuring. If there is a moral to this story, it is probably this: stand up for your rights, document everything, and do not let anyone, HOA president or otherwise, bully you into giving up your property or your principles. Also, maybe do not try to steal your neighbor's propane tank for your hot tub. That seems like it should be obvious, but apparently it needs to be said. Life in Meadowbrook Hills is good now. I have great neighbors, a functional HOA, and a propane tank that nobody is trying to steal. Sometimes that is all you really need. That and maybe a good lawyer's phone number, just in case.